Меня зовут Юлия Шавшина, я руководитель ZIA University. Я коротко расскажу, что такое ZIA University и что мы делаем. ZIA University — это некоммерческий образовательный проект. Он был создан в 2014 году одним из собственников нашей компании ZIA Альянс Юрием Дуэнос. У ZIA University есть миссия. Мы верим в потенциал продакт-менеджмента Украины, верим в развитие здесь, в Украине. И наша миссия — развивать эти комьюнити, развивать эти индустрию. Наши учебные программы ZIA University построены на 3 ключевых вещах, чем они, собственно, интересны нашим студентам. Первое — это максимум практики. Второе — это мы привлекаем экспертов, уже состоявшихся в бизнесе. И третье — наша программа уникальна. Совместно с нашими экспертами мы делаем их такими, чтобы уже профессиональным студентам было максимально полезно, интересно, было дополнительное value. Так, например, наша известная программа Product School, последняя была реализована в ноябре прошлого года. Мы ее сделали с компанией Google совместно. В этой программе был конкурс «100 человек на место», и очень приятно видеть здесь выпускников этой программы. В ZIA University это не единственный проект. Сейчас действует M&A школа. M&A School — это школа по слиянию и поглощению в IT. Мы не останавливаемся только на продакт, двигаемся и в sales направлении, и маркетинг, и development. Продолжая тему развития IT-комьюнити, мы рады приветствовать сегодня вас. С нами сегодня есть Брент Лаймер. Брент поделится своим опытом. У него шикарный опыт в развитии глобальных продуктов, более чем 15 лет. Брент руководил международными кроссфункциональными командами. Сегодня он поделится своими секретами, расскажет свои уроки. И мы ожидаем за самый интересный ответ, вернее, за самый интересный вопрос, мы ожидаем, что Брент поделится также одной из интересных книг. Брент, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. Oh, that was a little louder than I thought it would be. Thank you for coming and spending your Saturday with me. I'm honored to be here. I don't think we got enough dudes here for this meeting. So, how many females do we have in the group? I can see one. Okay. My name is Brent Lymer, and I've been in product management for approximately 15 years. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer for a startup located out of El Segundo, California, just outside of Los Angeles, about 5 minutes from the airport there. But I've worked in a number of roles within product management, including product marketing, UI design. I've done some engineering work. I've worked as a bouncer at nightclubs. I've played hockey all my life. I have multiple experiences that make me an ideal product management professional, and I'm assuming you probably have an eclectic group of skills as well that you bring to the table as a product manager, because you are a segment and you're a multiple full segments, and you're always a consumer, and you bring that mindset to it. So let's talk about segmentation for a second. Who here is a product manager? Okay. Product marketers? Okay, any executives here? One over here, okay. Anyone in sales? Anyone in marketing? Okay. So, who's in sales? So, surprisingly, you should have all put your hands up. You're all in sales. We're all in sales if you're in product management. You're selling ideas. You're selling concepts. Who's in marketing? Okay, yeah, some of you got it now. Who's in marketing? That's getting better. Who's in marketing? All right. You're all, just like sales, you're all in marketing as well. Any engineers here? Yeah, there was free food, right? So let's get started. I want to, for the past week, I've had the honor of being in this room presenting to the product managers here at ZIA. And one of the things I like to talk about is not my successes. I like to talk about my failures. Because I think failing is if you take the time to be introspective and find out what went wrong, you can make corrections. Successes we take for granted too often. We don't take the time to be introspective about it. But failures are a great learning lesson, and I'll cover that just a little bit more. But I have 5 lessons. So this is going to be more of a high-level philosophy look at your jobs, and more strategic. I'm not going to cover a lot of tactics. We really don't have a lot of time to cover tactics in an hour. Those things can be picked up through books or courses, and I have a list of those things to provide to you at the end of the slideshow. So I want to cover 5 lessons that I learned. And the first one is people matter. Second one would be an early adopter of ideas. Data matters. Be an educated risk taker. Don't forget about yourself. And then I'll cover some resources. If I had done this 15 years ago at the start of my career, the first item that I have, people matter, would have been the 5th. And that's probably one of the biggest mistakes early in my career. So you're going to be asked to assume a leadership role in your company as a product manager. You're going to interact with a diverse set of audiences, customers, executives, analysts, press, partners, engineers, and sales teams. And you need to be an influential leader. So that means, right off the bat, the customer is your raison d'etre, or your reason for being. That's your primary focus. You're an advocate of the market. You're there to speak on behalf of the consumer. Sometimes the consumer has no idea how to articulate their needs, so that's what you do, is you put it in perspective of value. But your number one goal is you're the advocate for the customer when it comes to designing a product. You're trying to successfully address their needs. And when I refer to needs, I don't only mean they'd like to do something, but quite often people forget that frustrations are another thing that consumers are looking to appease. The second one is you wear many hats, so you'll need many pairs of shoes. So you've probably heard the phrase, you don't really know someone until you walk a mile in their shoes. Well, as a product manager, you're, as we already learned, you're a salesperson, you're a marketer, you're a product marketer, you're a product manager, you're a project manager. Some of you, anyone do tech specs here? Technical documentation for UI design? Okay, web design? So you wear multiple hats. And then on top of that, you're expected to be a business leader as well, right? So very, very diverse group of responsibilities and roles that you bring to the table. So in essence, if you're wearing multiple hats, you're going to have to understand how to walk a mile in everyone else's shoes, whether it's internal stakeholders or it's external partners or it's your customers. Any managers here that look after resources? You must, you're an executive. Anyone else? Okay. Anyone have dreams of being a manager? All right, no one has a dream about being a manager? All right, maybe not this week, but when you decide that you want to buy a house, you want to be a manager, you get paid a little bit more. So when you're going to do that, plan and hire for tomorrow, not today. All right, the pressure is, I got to get this solved today. That person you're bringing in, most likely you're interviewing them for what they can provide to get rid of a frustration that you're experiencing right now. Short-term philosophy. You want to bring someone in that is going to bring you, the product, and the company down the road with you. Someone that sees your vision or shares your vision or helps produce the vision. So remember that. You're not simply hiring for what the problem is today, but where you want to be tomorrow. Another good point is understand how different groups are measured and motivated. So in that case, you don't want to get into a conflict of not understanding how someone is motivated to do something or be rewarded for it. So quite often, the conversation I had early in my career, the frustration was I would like them to do something, but they would like to do it another way. And until I understood the reason why they wanted to do that, because they were held to key performance indicators that were in complete conflict with what I wanted to achieve. Vice versa, I had key performance indicators to be measured against that was in complete conflict with them. And this is very common when you work with sales. Sales has sales goals, right? And they're short term and they're in 3 months, over a quarter. You're thinking the long-term piece. But until you really understand what they're being rewarded and measured against, you can't actually respect that and come to some kind of mediation where you're both in a win-win situation. And it's okay to ask about that. You're not asking about their salary or their compensation. You're simply seeing what's motivating them to achieve success. The paradox of avoidance. Early in my career, if I wasn't interested in speaking to you, I didn't speak to you. But here's the sad part about that philosophy. Those are the people you actually have to spend more time speaking to. So you actually have to spend time influencing them and onboarding them because they have influencings outside. So I spent a lot of my time trying to work around people or over them or simply bypassing them rather than spending the time up front to onboard them. Get them involved, see the vision, share it, allow them to participate in it. Just like when you work with engineering on your stories, if you're in an agile environment, you go through iteration, iteration, iteration. And the same is for strategy and vision. You got to go through iteration, iteration, iteration to evolve people to give their feedback and to buy into where you want to be headed. Share successes and own failures. So when you have a success in a product launch, how many of you do an event with the engineering team? Okay. How many think that would be a good idea in the future? All right, come on, there's more than that's a good idea. How many of you are in sales? Maybe I can see more hands with that. Oh, you guys are not getting this. So share successes with those people that help bring you there. You may be a special snowflake in the household, but everything is not from your own doing. You rely on other people in your success to bring a product to market. And a big, big factor of that is the engineering team. Own failures. If you're the product manager, you're the GM of your product, you're the CEO of your product, the buck stops there. There's no finger pointing. If it failed, you have to own on it. And by own on that, it means you take a look at it, you do a retrospective, and you make changes for the next release. But it's not always someone else's fault. Own up, take ownership of that, and then move through as a leader. Look at the perspective of how can I change it to make it a better release moving forward as well. So be an early adopter of ideas. When I first started, and probably for the first 5 years of my career, I was very successful at getting things done. I could work from quarter to quarter to quarter very well and hit every target we needed to do, every release we ever did. I worked in a company where we went from $80 million a year in revenue to $400 million in revenue in about 3.5 years. Very, very successful. That was after 3 years. I had no idea what we were going to do in the 4th year. I spent all my time thinking about the short term. And then when it came to what's the next big thing, our competitors were doing that. So what you want to be is you want to keep up on what's happening in the industry, what things are coming out. If you hear about something after the fact where someone's launched a product, in most cases you're too late. So embrace ideas, not things. Things are the outcome of an idea. You're late. Someone's already thought about it. Okay? So do a lot of reading. See what's happening in the industry. When cloud computing first came out, you may not get it, but keep it in the back of your head. When JavaScript first came out, it was a client-side scripting language. And now what is it? It's a server-side language that's used for, when you look at JSON, it's used for dynamically creating pages on the fly and storing all kinds of information. And then you go to NoSQL databases where you can store JSON as documents. It's a completely turn of where it started. So think about those things in advance by embracing the idea or doing some investigation. 1 and 1 can make 3. Motorcycle, what is it? It's a bicycle and a car engine. 2 separate things gives a third one. So when you're looking at new technology, how can you apply to what you have right now and anything of vision that you're moving forward? It doesn't have to be a brand new thing. It can be a combination of multiple things put together to create something that's brand new. So that to that extent, 1 + 1 + 1 could equal 6. Question longevity. So when you're looking at new ideas, new technology, new concepts, new marketing conditions, how long is it going to last? Some things are in fact fads. Some things are fashions. They don't have a lifespan that's going to last a long time. So when you think that through and you're doing your evaluation, question the longevity of it. So ideas need to be nurtured to grow. So it's one thing to have an idea, but to bring it to fruition means execution. So you have a vision, but you still need to have the feet on the ground to move it to the next level. And that's extremely important. And to be honest with you, throughout my career, probably one of my shortcomings is I got great ideas, I get them all the time, but I just don't know how to move them to the next level. I get them to a certain level, but I don't get momentum enough. If you don't have that skill set, then fair enough. Find someone in your group that can do that for you, right? So think of Apple and think of Mac or Microsoft. One person's got the vision, the other person is doing the implementation to make it happen, right? They feed off of what they do best, and they cover up on what the other one doesn't do very well. Welcome disruption, even if you don't get it, right? A lot of companies don't welcome disruption. They write it off. Where's Blockbuster today, right? Totally disrupted by Netflix. And then Netflix has even disrupted that market themselves. They've moved from providing you content to creating content. So welcome it. It's telling you that something's going to happen and you need to get on board. It's actually a free service that you're getting from the market itself and from fellow peers in software, engineers and product managers. They're giving you a secret, so welcome it. And then anticipate potential tipping points. So when you, and this goes hand in hand with welcome disruption and question longevity. So when is this going to take off, or is it even going to take off? Right? So try to make some understanding of where it's going to take off. It's already taken off. You might be a little too late. However, there's an option for that, and I'll cover that later. But you definitely want to make sure that you're anticipating tipping points. You want to get in advance of them and move through it. And then that's part of the execution that I just spoke about earlier is the piece that will push you through that tipping point. And you'll get into a classic, ideally, hockey stick type growth model. Lesson 3, data matters. So I originally started on this and I called it presentation matters, and then I went to content matters. And then what I really thought through as I was working on it, it got deeper and deeper into data. So we all work in sales and marketing. I think I've got the majority of the room to understand that and agree to it. You sell and you market ideas every day. You're influencing buyers, right? You want to influence their buyers' behaviors, and your buyers at this point are executives, partners, or investors. Or even your engineering team for that matter. So data should be leveraged to influence adoption and acceptance. So influence is not manipulation. Manipulation is when you come from a point of power. When you're selling an idea, you're not coming from a point of power. You're at a disadvantage. The person that has the power is the one that's either going to agree to it and finance it or move it into the next level. So you're coming from a position of being subservient. So you want to influence. So it's a positioning of an idea. Well, how do you position an idea? You can provide a vision, but a lot of people, as we move forward in our software careers, are asking for hard data. What proves out your idea? Where are you going to go in the future? What do you anticipate to be a problem versus a success? So influence is a positioning of an idea. It's not manipulating it because you don't have the power to manipulate. And data validates that position. So when you go to present, you've got data to support it. Now, I'm not suggesting that you come in there with 14 spreadsheets and you pull them out on the table to sell your vision, but they need to be there. So if someone wants to take the supporting data, they can walk away with it and go through it. Little spelling mistake there. So a picture is worth 1,000 words, but sometimes a number is a quicker way to get to yes or no. Right? Your presentation could be a beautiful piece of artwork, but it actually has no story or nothing behind it. Looks great, you know. Maybe you can take a few of the slides and put them on your fridge besides the kids' color painting. But other than that, it has no value. So that's where data does that. And it gets quicker to the point in some instances than anything else you can have. So the big thing is made up of thousands of small things. So the little things do matter. They may not matter every day, and you don't want to get into the minutiae of everything, but they build up the big thing. The vision that you may have is the big thing, but how are you going to support it? What validates it in the market? Who agrees to it? Who disagrees with it? And data, once again, will do that for you. Ask people why. So for about 3 years, my nickname was Wino, not because I drink wine, but I would ask 2 questions. Why? Or sorry, 1 question, and I would follow up quickly with no. So the first one was, why would you like to do that? And they go, well, I feel, well, I feel like not listening anymore to that because you have no data. So I would say no to it. Now, I've gotten much better on my delivery on that, but I ask why. And it does 2 things for me. It shows me how invested they are in their idea, right? They've done the legwork. They've gone out of the way to get the data to support it. Or they just feel at that point. So I've got multiple things going on in my head where I've got data, and now you're asking me to evaluate something that sounds like a kind of an interesting idea, but I have to make a choice. I've got something that supports and says this is going to happen, or there's a probability, or there's something that has inherent risks associated because it's just an idea at that stage. So why for me was a way to, not to deflect, but to help me prioritize the other activities that I had. So feel free to ask why. And if someone doesn't have that data, politely ask them to get it so that you can evaluate it and prioritize it against everything else that you have on your plate. Here's something that is very important. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this than any other topic because it gets to the core of actually your product as well. So architect your product to speak to you. So how many of you do focus groups? Okay, how many of you know what a focus group is? Okay, you just refuse to do them. Surveys. How many of you watch customers interact with the product? Okay. How many of you go to online forums and look for information? How many of you talk to your support team on a regular basis? Okay. How many of you talk to your support team on a regular basis, and for every release you have, you do 1 or 2 items to have stories related to support issues? Every roadmap that you do and every release you do should have something like that. So you should have 3 things. Bugs. You want to address bugs. Every release. Technical debt. Why do you want it on your roadmap? Anyone have any idea why you want technical debt on your roadmap? It's because it takes an engineer's time away from the things that you want to build. Without that insight, your expectations are off right off the bat. The other thing is technical debt, as the word debt indicates, it accumulates over time. So it inherently increases the risk of your releases over time as well. So if you can get it as you're building through or addressing it in a process and on an ongoing basis, it's a best practice in place. And the last thing is support. So support and sales are the 2 parts of an organization that are the closest to a customer outside of a PM. And in most cases, they're closer because they interact with them on a daily basis. Support gets to learn about their frustrations. Sales gets to learn about what they want or would like to want or need. Support organization is giving you insight of things that are broken, that are clunky, that the user experience isn't ideal, that they may not be there the next time a subscription comes up. So you're looking at churn possibilities. So at the very least, you should be at least evaluating those. But I advocate those 3 items to some extent should be in every release that you do and roadmapped on it to ensure that an engineer resources against it. So it's all part of grooming the backlog as well. How many use Agile? Approach to release, okay. Use Jira to manage that? Okay, good. So make sure that they end up in your backlog. So support calls typically go into a secondary system. And if it's not set up to go into Jira right now, make sure that it is set up to go into Jira. If it's one that isn't integrated with Jira, you're going to make sure that they transfer over. They shouldn't stay in a system and that's the only place that they're stay for forever until you actually go and mine them. Same goes with bugs. So it's changed quite a bit, but when I was at McAfee, we had a bug database of 400 bugs that had lasted in there for 5 years. What do you think we had to do? we had to spend a full cycle with our QA team to actually go and validate and verify that whether they were real or not anymore. So we spent a month doing that. That's a month away from using your QA resources for a release. So technical debt, bugs, and support should be in every one of your releases, or a consideration in every one of your releases. And remember, every time you don't do them, you're pushing them out into a future release. So how do you architect your product to speak to you? Well, how many people have instrumentation in their product? Maybe, yeah, we had trouble with the word instrumentation during the week anyway. So let me explain instrumentation first. Instrumentation is just a feedback loop where someone maybe clicks on an item in a UI, and maybe it uses a RESTful call and sends someone did this, and you pick up that information. So your product is instrumented to provide you data based on what someone is doing and not doing in its absence. So, you know, typical things like, how many have a product that installs? Okay, so it would provide you information on what OS they were on, what user agent they were on, if it was over the internet, how many installed, how many didn't install, how many got through 3 steps versus 4 steps, how many walked away from it. So that's the type of instrumentation when it comes to installing a product. Similarly with registration, you can go through the funnel flow. Where it gets really, really valuable is when you start to instrumentate what someone is doing against the product, where they're clicking, what are they doing, what's the funnel from that going through, because you have assumptions when on how a product's going to be used. And QA typically goes from A to B to C to D on that linear path that you provide them, what a user's doing. Well, a user's like a drunken bum on the road driving all over the place. They'll eventually get to where you want them to go, but they're not going the route that you have in place. So what this allows you to do, even when you do focus groups and you're watching them, because typically you give them a script, you go do this, or you give them a small little number of items to do, a small path to go, and they'll follow the script that you gave them. But that doesn't indicate the way they're going to move around through your product. Your product, when it speaks to you, it's being a proxy or an advocate for the consumer, and it's identifying exactly what they're doing and not doing. So when is that ideal? Well, let's say you have navigation and you have 3 features, and each one of them, one's at the top, one's a layer deeper, the other one's a layer deeper. If you have the one that's on the layer at the highest and no one is using it, but you find the second one is where more people are clicking on, then you want to reverse them or move them into a different area. Now, this is a poor example because I just figured out you can't get to the second one unless you click on the first one. So let's look at horizontal navigation instead. So it allows you then to move the items this way to the ones where people are most using them. So they're actually, it's educating you at a huge inexpense by just building it into the product, versus a focus group, which has high expense, and from my own personal view, little value. Typically, the people that come to the focus group, if they're not your core customers, then you get sort of a mixed message of whether it's real or not. So spend the time, architect it into your product as a feature, and the audience is you. So you're the one that's going to set what the requirement set is for that option. Everything in a product doesn't have to be a feature or a function for the consumer. It's for a consumer, but it doesn't have to be for the end user consumer, okay? Lesson 4, be an educated risk taker. So I'm Canadian, and we're not risk takers. Except when we put skates on. Government looks after us the day we're born to the day we die. If you take a risk and you spend someone's money, you owe them that money. If you go in a car, you put your seatbelt on. So we were putting seatbelts on before it was a government mandate. Car insurance. I live in the U.S. now, and I'm still over-insuring myself because of the habits I have from living in Canada. So this was a tough one for me to get my mind around. Now in the U.S., it's a different perspective. If you take a risk and you fail, it's a badge of honor. you are rewarded by people said that person went and tried and did what they wanted, and although it didn't work out, they still did it. And so it's a different perspective on viewing risk, where we're rewarded for taking that chance, and maybe, just maybe, it might pull itself out. And if nothing else, then there's a learning experience out of it. So what did I learn from this? Well, perfect is an abstract. You're never going to be perfect. You're never going to get it. It's a goal, and it's a stretch goal. So be an educated risk taker means because perfect's never attainable, there's always an inherent risk that it's not going to work. So get over it. Don't worry about it. But what you want to do is evaluate that risk over the long haul. Feel empowered to delay product releases. Who here has ever delayed the release of their product? Oh, well done. I congratulate for that. A lot of people find it really uncomfortable. Now, let me ask a question. Did you delay it because it was late coming out of engineering? Hands for that? Okay. Did you delay it because of quality? Okay. You should feel empowered to do that because there's a risk from going on time just to release it. So it's a spiral risk to take place. So for example, you release and you get bugs, so you get call drivers for that, right? So there's two brands that you need to worry about when you release early and it's littered with bugs. The product brand and then the corporate brand. And if you continually do that, you erode both of them. And how many of you have subscription services where you had problems releasing that way? Okay. So now you have a problem of retention because now people have an opportunity to say goodbye, thank you. But I am encouraged that you feel confident that you can do that. In your case, Dio de Loco, or what is that? Spanish anyways, you with the skull shirt. Yeah, you. When you did that, did you discuss it with your manager, or were you empowered to make that call yourself? Okay. So how long did you delay it for? Oh, okay, that's significant, right? But let me ask you, do you think it was better that you delayed it than put it out? Okay, you're not helping me. All right. So who's delayed for more than 3 months? Okay, okay. Anyone here in the enterprise space do enterprise software? So how long is your life cycle in the enterprise space for a product? Okay, that's good because in some cases, the enterprise space, the life cycle of a release could be 3 to 4 years. So what do you think happens over 3 to 4 years? A lot happens in the market, and you can get halfway through it, and the product is not even valid in the market anymore. So you should feel empowered to delay your releases, okay? And if you don't, go back to your office and have that discussion. Because, like I say, there's risks for not doing it. In my opinion, by doing it, you inherit a hell of a lot more risks than delaying it. Time, to me, as far as setting when a release takes place, in most cases is an artificial boundary to hit. Unless you absolutely have to go against your competitors at a certain time, or you're attending maybe a trade show like RSA or something like that where you have money spent on marketing, then you have to reevaluate that. I'll give you an example. I worked in the the consumer security software industry for McAfee for years. And 3 times a year there was releases. Back to school, everyone released a product for back to school. So if you didn't, you missed not only the press opportunity, but the revenue opportunity. Christmas, and then tax season. So you needed to be on board with everyone else because your competitors are all releasing. If you were absent, everyone was wondering what happened, what went wrong, right? So that's a scenario where you'd have to hit a date. But in most cases, especially now that we've moved to an agile environment, and we use the internet to distribute updates, those dates can be managed differently. Now, I wouldn't say, if you're in a constant situation where you're missing your agile dates, then one of 2 things is happening. The engineering team, you don't have as many resources as you think you do. Go back to the discussion I talked about technical debt. Maybe they're working on other things that are not customer focusing or facing. The other thing is you're stuffing the sprints too heavily, and that's your responsibility, okay? So try to think of that. If you're experiencing that, then that's a way to go back and evaluate to see what's going on and correct it. Consider being second, all right? It's nothing wrong if someone's going to go out. Let them test the water, right? If you know that you've got several points of differentiation against the competitor, and you know if they're releasing first, you still have those three, and they have no plans to actually introducing them, allow them to test the waters for them. Allow them to fail and make the mistakes that you can learn from. So consider second. Who was first to Facebook? MySpace. And where are they today? They're not first, and they're definitely not second, right? So there's things that you can take advantage by doing that. But the whole point is, second is only an option if you've got points of differentiation. If you don't, then you're just a Me Too product, right? You're going in after the fact, and then you're fighting for what's left over in the market rather than the entire market. Embrace failure as a learning experience. Absolutely. Take the time to do retrospectives after your releases. Who here does retrospectives? Okay, and who runs those? Engineering, show of hands, or PM? Or both? Okay, so do you do it in your Scrum meetings, or do you set aside a meeting? Separate meeting, okay, good. And do you focus on both successes and failures? Okay. Do you get into finger pointing? Okay, good. So failures to me, my learning experiences in life and where I am today are based 100% on failures. And I have a failure every day, right? Like I'm wondering, really, should I have worn these pants right now? Because they're uncomfortable. They're brand new. It's a complete failure for me. So I won't be wearing them for the first time that I present somewhere else. So, but failures are an example where you can take that knowledge and adjust and apply it to a bigger piece. But if you continue to make the same mistakes, I used to refer to it, so first time is a learning experience. Second time it occurs is maybe forgot. And the third time it occurs is a cognitive problem, right? It means you just don't get it, or the person doesn't get it. But take the opportunity to do your retrospectives. And then it's one thing to identify that there was a problem. Make sure you actually take the next step and implement the change. And then evaluate it over your next releases. So in addition to get better and better software, Agile is a great method to get better and better processes as you move through the use of Agile as a way to do your product development releases. Doing nothing can be a valid option, all right? There's often a pressure actually to do something. Our competitor is doing that. What are we doing? You know, this is new in the market. Why haven't we implemented it? Our enterprise team has some software that makes sense and may work in the consumer market. Why aren't we doing that? So it's an option. Three options. Do nothing. Stay where you are. Do nothing to me means completely ignore it, all right? It means don't even evaluate whether staying where you are is even an option. Stay as an option or make a change that makes sense. But it's always an option in place. And quite frankly, in most cases, it's the cheapest option as well. Have a backup plan. I can't stress that enough. I mean, at the very least, a rollback is a backup plan, okay? So have that in place. Does everyone have the ability to roll back? Startups may not. See slide 3, technical debt, for that, to help you with that. But rollback at least is the ability to have a backup plan. But you should still have other backup plans to help you mitigate risk. So what I meant by this basic slide is it's okay to be a risk taker as long as you're looking at what the risks are, the probability. So instead of being risk adverse, I would say be an educated risk taker and be probability adverse. By probability, I mean we've got a 90% chance of failing, right? or we have a 10% chance of failing, which means it's a good move. So have the ability to evaluate what the risk is. Everything has an inherent risk. Even in an organization where you feel you don't have a risk, your lead engineer takes another job. That's a risk right there every day. So educate it, be on top of things, but don't avoid risks, because you'll just stay where you are and your product will slowly over time just do like the walk of death until it needs to be pulled off the market. All right, lesson 5. This is one of the things that I did really, really bad, is I completely ignored myself. And if all the lessons are the ones I gave you, which are really tactical about or strategic about doing your jobs, this one is extremely important to me because product management has changed a lot over the last 15 years. Let's just quickly show of hands. How many of you have business degrees? Okay. How many of you had engineering degrees? Okay. Life science degrees? Arts degrees? And I absolutely love this group. And that's not sarcastic, but how many don't have any degrees but are in product management right now? And I'll tell you why I love this group. Because somewhere along the line, someone tapped them and said, you've got something very, very interesting. And that happened to me. My degree is in cellular biology and genetics. I had no business background at all. But, and I was surprised when I told the story during the week. You're all familiar with the Detective Columbo, I hear, or understand, right? So the person that tapped me and said, you'd be good, is she said to me, you ask the Columbo questions. Like, you just don't ask the first question. When you get a response, you go, hey, well, what about that? And then someone gives it to you and you walk away and you go and you got your cigar and you go, come back and go, yeah, but what about this, right? So it's looking at a situation that is completely different. You get the top piece of it, but you wonder how deep someone has gone through it to ask those questions. And that's why I like that group. Somewhere they've got that inherent skill, right? They can pick up an education later on, or they can pick it up on the job. But there's something that makes them different right from the start. So congratulations to that group. Let's give them a hand. Oh, I shouldn't have put that in my mouth. So consider professional certification. This job has changed so much over the last 15 years, primarily driven by the software industry. So now there's certification programs for being a product manager, for being a product marketer, for being a product manager that actually excels in agile processes. How many people do agile again? Okay, how many of you wonder what's a product manager supposed to do in agile outside of write stories? All right, so I'm a little older than you, maybe about 2 years. That was the worst joke, guys. You know why it was the worst joke? Because no one laughed at it. So I was around in the old days when Agile was invented. So I got that going for me. And at no point was I ever asked to attend any meetings to go, hey, what does PM think about this? It was basically a development process that was put together. And they suddenly told us, oh, by the way, the requirements are going to be written like this and they're going to be called stories. And I'm like, what does that mean? Well, we've got these epics and we've got these projects and there's subtasks, okay. And oh, by the way, you're going to write smaller requirements for us because we know what we're doing. And I'm like, well, I've worked with you for the last 3 years and some of you know what you're doing and others definitely don't know what they're doing. And they rely on my requirements to give them some kind of insight. So I think finally we're at a point, probably the last 5 years, where Agile and PM have finally got to a situation where it makes sense, where they're working together. And the things that I love about it, and I'm going a little off topic on this, is I like to whiteboard with people. I like to get out there and get the ideas. Get there working with the lead engineer or the person that's required or working on the task, because you can go through a flow and an idea and they go, no, that's a technical problem. We got to go around this way. Okay. Or it gets way too long and you both sit back and go, that's not a good user experience. How can we get rid of stuff? I absolutely love that. What I don't like about that in the Agile sense is everyone walks away and then, You're not sure if you're both are on the same agreement. Maybe you were for the first hour. 3 weeks later, while someone's working on it and it's a third party, you're hoping that. So at the very least, someone should be taking a picture of that and attaching it to the story. That's a good start, but I would prefer if someone actually went into Visio or another diagram program and put it out into a wireframe, which now allows people to iterate against it. So when I use Jira, I use it for what used to be called a PRD, or product requirements document. And the comments is where iteration takes place, and it becomes the plan of record. All the decisions are recorded in one place through multiple conversations. It's interactive, it's collaborative, and it's based on those types of things. So there is some documentation there. And so it's not as much as it used to be. So that adheres to the Agile Manifest or the Scrum Manifest. You're still doing the interactions with the team. So you're doing conversations versus documentation. How many of you are embedded with your engineering teams? Yeah, I sit with my engineering teams. I don't like sitting with the riffraff in marketing. So I sit with my team, and you hear everything that's going on over things. So if you have that option, I just consider it. And it may not even have to be a full day. If you have an area that you can sit there for maybe a couple hours, as long as you're getting the conversations and understanding what's going on and being part of it, you're not missing out on things. You know, a lot of the time when engineering works, they get up and they talk to the person beside them very, very quickly. They don't email because it's not conducive to the conversation, because they would have to write 4 paragraphs to decide something technical. They actually do it the old way, where you get up and go talk to someone, right? Rather than sending an email and wait till the next day to get the response. So you get to be a part of that. So that's one of the things I would say, we go back to the office and look at it as an option. So what does that got to do with professional certification? Nothing really, we just got off on a tangent. So let me come back to that. Organizations like Pragmatic Marketing, you just heard about Zio University, right? That's a start, that certification runs you through a framework. And the one that I just recently did is the Association of International Product Marketers and Managers. And they have certification where and by certification, I don't mean you just show up on a weekend and course, do some skiing, you can do plastic surgery, right? I mean, you write a test. It's not as hard as PMM, where you're a project manager, but think of where project management was 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. It was, everyone knew about it, but everyone was doing different things. And then they went into certification, so it became best practices, and a product manager was a product manager. Or sorry, a project manager was a project manager. They were certified. They wrote tests. Everyone did the same tests. It was standardization. And that's where we're at with product management right now, is certification on best practices and looking at frameworks for releasing that are agnostic to whatever industry or vertical you're in. That framework will work for you, but you're not restricted to it. You can make modifications to it. And we spent the last 5 days going through the, I'm horrible with acronyms, AIPMM, a framework here with Zio. Become a semi-expert of many. So we talked about this before. You wear multiple hats. You're going to wear multiple shoes. You need to have multiple skill sets. And I'm not saying be the expert, but you should be able to have a conversation with the expert. And if you can't, then you need to default to the expert. All right? So things that you might want to consider to become a semi-expert is Agile, the Agile approach, UI design. You don't have to get into human factors, but you need to understand those types of things. So basic things. 3 reasons for navigation. Where am I? Where can I go? Where have I been? Just the basics, right? But well, you need a little bit more than that. But that's what I'm getting to. That's the level that you need to understand. You don't need to be an artist or a graphic artist. You just need to understand the concept. Online marketing, right? How are people being driven to your products if you don't understand SEO? You need to understand how people are showing up there, because it's part of your funnel. JavaScript is great if you want to learn how to program very quickly. It's a loose language, but it gives you the concepts. You should be able to have a conversation with your engineering team about a for loop and an if statement. An if statement. If you can't, then pick it up, right? Other areas, just general marketing. Strategy is a big one. So strategy was a big miss in mine. Like I said earlier, I talked about tactics a lot. Very, very good at it, getting things done. But at some point, then there's no more things to do because you haven't thought of the long-term strategy. So, I'm taking a certification course right now in product strategy through Cornell online. And that's the beauty thing about these. You can get Ivy League education now, or portions of it from the MBA programs on an online course and incredibly affordable for, spend 6 weeks on it and do it online anywhere in the world. You don't have to, try to get into the program. You can be part of it. So I keep telling my wife that I go to an Ivy League school now, and she keeps reminding me, no, it's eCornell. So, but I don't care. Build your brand equity. Who knows what a core competency is? Oh, you guys all need to know what a core competency is. That's part of product management. So that's your homework for tonight. And tonight, not look at your phone right now, okay? Core competency is what do you do better than anyone else, right? So as your business, what do you do better than anyone else? That's what makes you different, right? So a lot of people in software or in engineering will go, we're technical. No, that's not a core competency. It can be replicated very, very quickly, unless you're first in and you own patents and IP to protect that. But in general, technology isn't it. So just like a product or business has a core competency, each one of you should have one where you excel because you're in a competitive market. So I forgot to do this at the beginning. When I went back to school to study multimedia design, to get into working in a technical vocation, the first thing that they did was introduce us, class size is probably a third of this. And they said, shake the hand to the person to your left, shake the hand to the person to your right, introduce yourself. And so he thought that was part of the, hey, we're all in the class together. And the person said, in 6 months to a year, you're going to be working for that person, or they're going to be working for you. This industry is so close and so tight that you'll be working with people over and over again. The reason I'm here is my friend Punkage back here works at Zeo. We've worked at 3 different places together, right? The person that hired me at McAfee, I've worked at 5 places together, right? So, and I do the same. I pull people in that I work with. You want to work with people that A, you're compatible with and are good, right? And you'll all know about everyone else. And now LinkedIn even makes it even easier to say, oh, so-and-so's over there now. Well, did you hear about Susie? She's here, right? So this is a close industry. So your brand, your core competency, you should be able to do that right off the bat. Even when you go to an interview, someone says, what makes you different than everyone else? You should be able to just blurt it out. It's like having your own personal elevator pitch. So my core competency is, because of my eclectic background and understanding of technology, I can sit and look at a problem, like an existing problem that just arose right now, and come up with maybe 2 to 3 alternatives. They may not be right, because we got to do the research to go through that. But that's what I bring to the table. That's where I excel as being a product manager. So if you don't have one right now, build one, okay? In addition to that, how many of you blog? Okay, how many of you would even consider blogging about your profession? All right, that's building your brand, all right? You accumulate technical debt. Right? You are a product. You have flaws and bugs. Trust me, I'm littered with them. So you need to address them the same way you would do a product. Right? You need to prioritize them and you need to work on them. If you allow them to accumulate, like I've allowed 20 pounds to accumulate of technical debt that I have to work off, if you keep putting it off, it becomes more and more. And that's where education comes in. So it doesn't have to be formal education. Who here believes in the concept of lifelong learning? Oh, you guys, who here is in sales? All right, the same thing should be for lifelong learning. All right, so in Canada, when I left with an attitude that in Canada, the last time anyone ever wrote a test was to get their driver's license. The general population that's the last time they did something that certified who they were. They took a test to drive, to validate that they had a skill set. Now, I'm not suggesting that you need that all the time, but who puts away money or very often gets books related to business or books related to technical writing or programming or anything that would be relevant to their business, what they do on an ongoing basis? Okay, you should be considering that. Who here has a boss that allows that and pays for it? And that's good. You should be happy with that. But every one of you should have that, a little bit that's put aside where you can actually invest in yourself, which means an investment in the company. And even if the company doesn't do it, you need to do it as well. So who here has had the longest time at a job? What's the longest time you've ever had in a job? 4 years, okay? Anyone longer than 4 years in the same job? Same company, let me put it that way. Okay, the old guy's in the corner over there. We're all gonna go out for beers later. The longest I've been in a job is 4 years as well. The last 5, one was 2 years, and then the other 4 for 1 year. It's so different now. My brand allows me to do that, but at the same time, my brand allows the employer to go goodbye, okay? But at the same time, I have a brand that allows me to find another job very, very quickly. So invest in yourself, because this job is a difficult one. You're not going to be an expert in every area. You have nothing else. I implore you to look up what core competency is. So anytime you get something, you're like in a meeting and go, what does that 3-letter acronym mean, right? Just quickly pull out the phone and look it up. And then put the phone down because you're in a meeting. So technical debt, you need to address it. So, books, online articles, taking a course on programming, just building something. Everyone here has an app in them, right? Everyone has something they want to do. If I could only program. You don't have to release it, but learn to program and just build this goofy little app. Burnout creeps up. That's the last one I want to talk about. And what I mean by that is your job, you get invested in it. You're an owner of your product. So when I think of product management, I think of product ownership. Who here owns P&L? Okay, everyone, who here doesn't know what P&L is? Okay, profit and loss. So basically you're in charge of the revenue and you've got a mini business. You're the GM or the CEO of that business. So you're managing money, profit, and then your losses and your expenses, right? So your job could increase, the pressure and time, also your hours increase, right? The number of days you're spending on the weekend or at work. Email, being mobile now means you're in constant contact with the office, to the extent that in some cases in the Silicon Valley now, some businesses instituted that there will be no email after 5 p.m. and definitely not on the weekend, because they realize what it's done to their employees. I get 6 weeks of vacation every year, and I'm lucky if I take 1 week, and it's usually to pay off sick time. And then it goes. The only time I ever see my vacation is if I'm lucky enough when I get asked to leave the company, they reimburse it and give it back to me. You don't get that in every business, and you don't get that in every state in the U.S. You're not accumulating in a bucket. It's just wasted, and it's there so that you don't burn out, because if you do, you're not really helping the business or yourself. So if you get vacation time, take it, all right? If you get the ability to have flexible hours, take it. If you find that your job is going from 8 hours to 10 hours to 12 hours, then you need to do something about it, because it's going to go to 13 or 14 hours until you do. And that's from my own experience. How many of you travel for work on a plane? Okay. Do you get the Wi-Fi and then start to work? I do it all the time, right? It's just, and then you go, yeah, that's just me, right? No, that's not right. So it'll creep up on you. So when I left McAfee, I had 16-hour days, and primarily because I had a team in Australia, and I had a team in Amsterdam, and I needed to talk to them on various times. So it meant I was up in the morning and I was out late at night. How many people, oh, it's different here, sorry, let me think. Is there any offshoring into the US? I don't think that even exists. I have a team in India, right, that does engineering right now. So our time, so this is where Jira is perfect. That's where we do all our iteration, have our conversations. and then we'll meet once a week for an hour, and we'll alternate. It'll be our time zone and then their time zone. But I think the only point that I want to do here, and I want to stress it one more time, is it creeps up to you and it's slow. You don't notice it happening. It's like a glacier. And then one day you wake up and you know, your family suffers from it as well. At that point, let me just move forward. I have some resources that I want to talk about. These are books that have heavily influenced me, and then some certification courses. And then I'll also make this presentation available for you so that you don't have to worry about getting them or not. So the work, and these are in no particular order. I remembered them and I wrote them down. The first one's called Purple Cow, and it's by Seth Godin. And basically, no one's ever seen a purple cow. Well, some people probably have, but illicit drugs were probably involved. But the whole point there is your product should be so different that no one has ever seen it before, right? And that's what this concept is. How are you different, and you're completely unique in the space. He's also got a fantastic book called Permission Marketing, and that came out and explained basically best practice for email marketing in the early days. And the beautiful thing about that was about looking at an audience of one and using their profile and dynamic content to market directly to one person for the needs that they have, even though you were sending out to, say, 1 million people in an email list. Each one of them got a different message, and it was tailored specifically for them. So that's a great book that I enjoyed. The Tipping Point, from a good Canadian guy by the name of Malcolm Gladwell, talks about how things move to the next level. What it is a small little thing that pushes them over the edge, so now they're bigger and better than they were. Crossing the chasm. Who here knows what the chasm is? Okay, so basically, in a product launch, there's a launch, then there's a growth, then there is a maturity, and then there's a decline. So during the launch, typically you have early adopters that take it on. And then you have the general market, like the early general market and the late general market. On a graph, it looks nice and easy, you know. It's like the early adopter takes it and hands it off to the early majority, and they run with it, and then they give it to the late majority. The chasm is that gap between the early adopter and the growth phase. And it could be quite wide. It's how do you influence that big growth phase from the influence of early adopters. Now, social media has helped a lot with that. So you're influencing it through peers and friends. But it's a science that explains that and techniques on how to actually jump that gap, because it just doesn't follow the path as it is. There's a big chunk there. And that's where most products fail, from early adopter into the large mass. The long tail. Long tail explains iTunes, and it explains Amazon. So what it is basically this. It's moving from inventory, physical inventory, to zeros and ones, which basically means media that you can have on a disk. So think of a book, for example. Physical book takes space. A book on a disk, you could have hundreds of books on a disk. You can have thousands of them on a disk, right? Also, the way book industry and movies, for example, work is, and music, there is a big boom when someone releases something, and over time it slows down. It doesn't disappear. And the long tail is those billions of books and media that exist, that over time people go, hey, I'd like to go back to that, and they sell 1, 2, or 3, or 4 of them rather than 500 on a day during a release. So the long tail explains the economies of holding on to stuff and moving to zeros and ones, and the value of actually selling into things that previously would have been out of print. And that's the economics behind Amazon and iTunes, and for a bit, what is it? Netflix. Outliers is a great book because it talks about things that are on the outside that suddenly become the norm that people miss. They assume that there's something different and not to be valued. And then Blink is a great book because it talks about the way we think and intuition and how quickly we have come up with an idea. And usually that is the best piece of it is at that point. So when we get in there and play with it, we can actually make it worse, or we completely write it off. Lean UX is great for people that Designers, there was a couple in here. Any designers? Okay. So this is a great book for that, but it's a great book for you to understand because you want to be a semi-expert. The inmates who run in the asylum. This is an old book, well, not old book, maybe about 15, 20 years. Anyone familiar with this one? Okay. Yeah, probably the designers, right? This explains why engineers should not do UI. All right? And by engineers, I don't mean human factors engineers or UI engineers. I mean engineers that know 3 colors, the primaries, and that's it. So it's about the mindset between an engineer and a designer, the way they go about doing things. And it talks about that difference. So it's almost a psychology book, and it's a really good read when you understand that. Don't Make Me Think is another great book for user experience, especially in the web environment. And winning at new products. Who's familiar with the stage gate process? Well, I know you are. We spent 5 days going over it. Stage gate means basically when you're going through a process. So I'll go quickly through the framework that's with AIPMM. Basically, you go through stages in new product development. There's 4 of them. You conceive of the idea, you plan for the idea, you develop the idea, then you qualify it to make sure by qualification in the market as well as look at QA. And then there's stages in the market. There's the launch stage, there's the deliver stage, and then there's the retire stage. So basically, there's 7 stages and 6 gates. At each point where you go from one stage, so from conceive into plan, your stakeholders on either side get together and they make a decision, and yes, no, go, or hold. Right? There's 4 decisions: go, kill, hold, and what's the other one? No, that's you're not helping me either. Sorry, there's 4 of them anyways. License, or build. So you basically go through that, and it's a formal point where you say, do we need to invest? Because every time you go to a new stage, it's more time, more money, more people. And it gets more and more as you go through. And when we talked about being risk averse or managing risk, every time you go down that line, you're increasing your risk as well because you've got to recoup the expenses that you've done previously. So if you break it into chunks of deliverables and you go through a process where you formally evaluate whether we should continue to go forward or not, you can cut it off and say, let's not do this any further. We tried it, great. We went through the process. Everyone's in agreement that it's go or no go, and then you just move through the next level. If it's kill, you move on to the next opportunity. If it's go, you continue with this opportunity. But it's a formal approach to getting together with the stakeholders at the one process into the new one to make an agreement to move forward. So some schools and certifications. So ZEO Alliance, there's a UR for that, the product school. Any graduates great. Yeah, I didn't have product school. No, I was homeschooled for product school. And certification. So the Association of International Product Marketers and Managers, great. I enjoyed it. It was great. I needed to get back into it. I'd moved out of product management, moved into consulting, and then into professional services. And I realized that I missed it. I loved working with the engineering team. I loved the whiteboarding part of it, and I wanted to get back into it, but I wanted to make sure I was still relevant. So I went back and did the certification. And then pragmatic marketing has a different framework than the other group. Their framework is more based around product management and product marketing, and it talks about inbound marketing for product management and outbound marketing for product marketing, and where the roles and responsibilities reside for each piece of it, and how it fits into the production of a product and its release and launch and managing through that process. So that's it for me. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. As you can see, that's no longer me, right? I'm the elephant in the room. I'm the purple elephant right now. That guy was young, handsome, and he had great talent. I don't know what happened to him. If you need to get a hold of me, feel free to send me an email. You can link up with me on LinkedIn, and I have a website for the small consulting business that my wife and I own. But I think I'm going to retire that very quickly now that I've accepted this job in El Segundo. But at this point, I think what we'll do is accept some questions. I believe there's 2 books that are available to the 2 best questions. So you want to come up and hopefully there's questions. Any questions? If you have a question, come on forward. Yeah, or we'll bring the mic to you. And now remember, I don't know everything, so I'll try my best.
Hi, Brent. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
And having this nice speech. I want to ask, you had experience working with ready products. Did you have experience in working on your own idea from the scratch?
Yeah, so I have experience. So that was the nice thing about going to work for McAfee. Great brand. Already had the brand was so good that our first product, when we went online, they loved us in spite of ourselves. I mean, we basically treated them like crap. I don't know why they stayed with us, but they had an affinity for the brand. So importance of brand is very good. So when I left McAfee, my wife and I started an online business for selling pet products over the internet, and we did it out of the house. We didn't hold inventory. So we did. If you're familiar with drop shipping, that concept. So basically, you take an order. So you do all the marketing. You take the order, and then you go to a manufacturer, and they mail it on your behalf, and they put it in. So you don't have to hold inventory in your house. So we ran that business for 5 years. She took it over, and while I went and did other things. But it was great for learning how to build a business from scratch. And I started and was interested in it because I wanted to be a mini expert in e-commerce. I knew I was not going to stay with it, but that's how I got to understand SEO, processing gateways. And then as we were building it out, 3 things happened. Reviews, so I learned how to put a review system, build a review system, put it on the site. Social media, how to use social media to send your products out to a larger audience through friends and family. And then anything related to legal for starting up a business, right? You got to get a license. So we lived in Nevada, so we needed a state license. Then we needed registration with the federal government for taxes purposes. Then we needed a city license. Then we needed a county license. Then we needed to incorporate as an LLC. Then we needed an account. So all those things related to running a business, a small business, whether it's 2 people or 150 to 500 for a small business, I got the opportunity to learn those things. And then the last thing that I have is a small app. This is going to be embarrassing now. Anyone here familiar with dog agility? Oh, this is going to be more embarrassing now. So basically, you and your dog, and not me, my wife does this, but I watch. So you run obstacle courses and you're timed and you compete against other owners and their dogs, and they jump over things, they go over things, they weave, and it's a timed event. And for me, I go every weekend to watch them, and I sit, and I have my laptop, and I just sort of, it's the most enjoyable thing I can do outside of getting on the ice and playing hockey. So dog agility, they're competing, right? So they have scores and they get ribbons. It's just, it's kind of goofy. But they go through these things where if they get 20 placements, then they get another bigger ribbon, right? So it's a whole scoring system that's in place. So I put together a web app, and I wanted to learn about hybrid apps versus native apps. And basically what it does is it records and allows people to go in and put their scores in and track all those types of things. Then I built something in that says, hey, where's my vet? So that if they needed to find a vet because they were out of town, incorporate Google Maps. So that was another way for me then to learn how to do iOS development, hybrid apps, and put a button using a hybrid app directly onto the iOS. So quick access. So yeah, so I've done a couple of things like that. I've never really taken a real business to market, but where I'm at right now, there's 11 of us, and I'm considered one of the founders. So it'll be interesting to see if we end up doing something like that. Well, it's broken right now. So if you want, send me an email. I'll get it up there, and you can get it. Okay. Like I said, I don't know everything. Other questions?
Thank you very much for sharing these great ideas and tips, first of all. And I have 2 questions, actually. The first one, how often do you act on a gut feeling basis? And the second question is, do you believe in gamification concept in modern products? 2 questions.
So let me ask the first one, and then I'll ask for some clarification on the second one, because I'm not familiar. I may be familiar with what you asked, but I'm not sure what the terms were, okay? So for the first one, I always start with a gut feeling. And let me go back to my wife again, because I shared this story this week as well. I have ideas all the time. I'm writing on paper, I'm bringing them in. So my first check is with my wife. I go, hey, what do you think if someone did this? So the last one was I was in Hawaii, and I'm not flexible anymore, so I can't get sunscreen on my back, right? What do you think if there was towels dipped in sunscreen? So guys like me, or any general American in general who's not going to get back there, right, without like a toilet brush. What do you think if that's the case? And she says, give me a second. So she always does this. She goes straight to Google and goes, someone already does it. And so I have gut feelings like that all the time. But from that purpose, the way previously you would have to go to the library, and maybe you would find a competitor right there, right? For new eyes, it's so quick to find out whether or not your idea is unique by going straight up to Google and say someone's in there. And then you look and go, but mine does this. Right? So you're looking for a product or a point of differentiation from you to them. So you can do that now and see, is it even worth my effort by doing a 5-minute Google search to even get started? Now the second question, could you repeat it again? Oh, gamification. No, but that's me. I'm 115 years old and I don't get games. So games for me is my parents sending me outside, go play, right? The best 3D game for me is called Outdoors. So I've never really got into the gaming philosophy. The last game I played was called Pong. You remember that old one? Like it was the first one, and you sit there and you'd wait for it to come, and you turn a knob, right? And then it would burn a line in your TV set that would never disappear. So I've really not gotten into it. Now, data point of 1, right? It's just I'm not the segment, but I do understand the concept of the interaction, right? So someone comes back over and over again and to participate in it, and then compete against someone in there. So there is obviously an audience that's in play there. Now, where I get lost is where people try to put gamification into a business app rather than a social or consumer app, and that's when I just lose it. Like, I'm just like, why would we spend time on that relative to other things? Now, that's just, like I said, I have a backlog of things in my JIRA tickets, and if someone's bringing me gamification, it's at the bottom of the backlog. But it may be completely suited to the audience that you're dealing with. And it's proven itself out as a way for people to interact with the product and participate over and over and over again, which is basically what you want, because that's the way you build brand recognition. Yeah, yes. I think we're gonna shout at one another.
Okay, thank you, Brent. So my question is, how do you prioritize features to get into backlog? So what are the main attributes, or maybe some metrics, score system, or something like this?
Okay, that's a very good question. So prioritizing the backlog. Does anyone here have a sales team that sells outside of direct-to-consumer? Or is everyone direct-to-consumer? Okay, so you don't experience what I experience, which is basically someone basically sets your priorities for you by selling to someone something that you don't build. So you basically at that point need to either reevaluate it. So sometimes it's told you because you brought someone on who's paid to contract with you, so you partner with them. The other ones is impact size. That's primarily the big one, is impact size on a feature relative to your segments. How many people are going to use it? And this is perfect when you have the concept of instrumentation in your product. You already know how many people are using a certain thing or not using one, right? So if I know someone's not using a particular feature, and I know that people are using a feature a lot more, higher priority. They both need to get worked on at some point, but you can use instrumentation to do that. The other thing too is 2 other items. Product or a point of differentiation. You want to get that out as quick as possible because you want to own the market as quick as possible. The thing about PODs is they have a life shelf, right? They can be replicated very, very quickly. So you want to own that space that you own it as the leader for as much as you can, because your competitors, as soon as they see it, we got to do that as well. So they'll rush for it. So that one would be a priority. And to the other point, let's just say you released a POD and I'm your competitor. I have to like reprioritize that so that I'm a me too. I'm just like you and I take away your advantage. So that's an example where we reprioritize as well. The other thing too is I am big on quality and user experience. So where I'm working right now, I went in and the CEO says, "Would you like to join?" I go, "Yeah, I'd love to join." And he goes, "What do you think our biggest problem is?" And I go, "You have 100 things 50% done. I want to do 5 things 100% done, and then move on to the next 5 things and the next 5 things." So prioritizing for me is like getting rid of, like a prime example. They said, "Hey, wouldn't it be great if we did these scoring things?" Here's what we do. We send text messaging out that help you actually make payments over text messaging. Someone said, "What if we did gamification for that?" Right? And I like shit my pants. I'm like, "What are you talking about? It doesn't make sense." So types of things like that. Is it in your core competency? That's an example of core competency. We don't do that. And I don't even know how we make money doing that, right? And we wouldn't increase because it's a one-off thing. I'm giving you a reminder. I don't want you to come back to look at the same reminder. I want you to use it once and make the payment. So to that point, prioritization depends on what's happening in the market right now too. So a shift in the market will also make you make decisions. But UI and user experience for me is something that I think you need to improve every time. And if it's clunky, instrumentation, once again, will tell you if they're going the right route that you're there. So it's an art, not a science. But there are some blatant things that you know that you need to move up. The other thing too is I don't like putting things off for like 6 months. If it's at a point of 6 months and it's in your backlog, you really need to consider if you're ever even going to get at it, right? Closes won't do. Closes won't fix, or make the decision and go, "We're going to take care of this right now." So for bugs and things like that related to support, where the backlog's in that case, that's technical debt that you need to do, right? So you need to make a choice. Are you going to let it just go, you can live with it, or are you going to address it? So that's why I always prioritize to some degree technical debt, bugs and support issues in every release I do, just so that I can manage and groom the backlog rather than have, as the case of McAfee, 400 items going to QA and then having to spend a month on QA resources to validate something that was put in there 3 years ago, whether it's even a problem in the product anymore. Any other questions? Oh, you have a question. And then there's a couple back here.
Yeah, hi Brent. Why so long faces? I have a question more like in a funny way. Do you believe that the 9 women can deliver a baby in a month? And the second question, Calgary Flames or Toronto Maple Leafs?
First, I'll answer the second question, Pittsburgh Penguins. Mm-hmm. The first one, are the women genetic engineers?
Nope.
Okay, then I don't believe that can be done. No, I think there are some instances where you can take resources and push them against something and get it done quicker. But it's not a linear equation. It depends on what's being asked of you. So I think quite often, and this is where management makes me smile, is you go, "Well, we don't have enough resources or we don't have enough engineers right now to do that." And they go, "Well, let's hire engineers." Okay, so we'll hire engineers. That means they won't get to it in 3 months. Because when you hire someone, they don't show up on the first day and just log in. They don't even have an email address, for one thing. They don't have access. They need to learn your code. They're not functional for 3 months, right? So to that extent, simply throwing a resource at it is not the answer sometimes. If you need to get a resource at it right away, sometimes the quickest way is actually not even hire. It's get a consultant. But still, they need to understand your code. An experienced engineer could get through your code quicker and understanding it. Now, then there's code. Then there's your systems, your processes, right? They have to learn that. So it all depends on the item and what it takes for skill set to actually deliver on it. By and large, people always forget. And you need to remind them, yes, we can bring someone in, but it's still delayed for 3 months. It's not an instant thing. Someone needs to be ramped up. to get to that point to deliver.
One question. I adore the way you said about learning from the mistakes and like transparently show them and explain them. What was your biggest fuck up, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, I shared this I think on day 2, and it wasn't as bad as it seems because it was corrected within an hour, but it was professionally embarrassing. So let me step back before that. I'll come back to that story. But to be honest with you, the biggest mistakes I made probably is the way I treated people early in my career, right? I was so focused on getting things done that relationships didn't matter, right? And in hindsight, and I shared this yesterday, I became the person I would never want to work for. So, you know, that I caution against that, right? It's one thing to, and that's why I moved the slide to the first one, because I've grown and understand that if you want to get things done, you need to be an influential leader, not a dictator saying this is the way it's going to be done. So the second one was, so in the consumer space for antivirus, at the time, definition files were used to, and they came down on a daily basis, right? You go up to the internet, if one existed, they bring it down, and they did what was called, crap, I can't remember the term, but you didn't get the full one, which was almost 3 megabytes, but then differentials. So the differential would come down and would be sewn in, and it would go back. So everyone does it once a day. So someone has, and by someone I mean this guy, has this great idea. You know what would make us completely different? And because the concept of zero-day attacks was starting to come in. So how can we take advantage of zero-day attacks and not modify our technology, right? So that would make a point of differentiator. So I said, why don't we do it every hour? So that means we're doing it 24 times a day, and our competitors are only doing once. So we built some marketing around that, and we launched. What do you think I did in the first hour? I created a denial of service attack on our own company because we weren't scaled. I forgot to involve it. I talked to engineering. I talked to marketing, I talked to support, I did not talk to IT, right? So he comes over and he was really good at it. He goes, did you do a change? I go, yeah, we just released. He goes, yeah, you're bringing down our entire business, right? And at the time, our entire business, if it was a day, for example, that a virus went out, it was $1 million day. Now, this wasn't the day a virus attacked us, but easily somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000 a day in revenue went through our website. So I laugh about it, and I even laughed about it then because it was so obvious when you think about it after the fact, right? But I was so focused on getting a marketing position and a point of differentiation in the market, and at minimal cost. It was truly, in this case, 2 lines of code, right? I changed it from 24 hours to every hour. I didn't change it, but engineering did. So that was probably the biggest business screw up I did. But lucky enough, it was caught within an hour. Backup plan, rollback. Okay. So yeah, that was the biggest screw up personally as far as technical goes. But personally, the way I treated people early in my career is still an embarrassment. Yes.
Thank you for sharing that. Yesterday I had a meeting with our research team that shared that terrible from my perspective user experience leads to more conversions in terms of business goals. And you were talking a lot, not a lot, but sometimes you were mentioning user experience as important part of your daily workflow.
Yes.
And where should be a balance between business goals and user experience, and what is most important in the long perspective from your side?
Well, the long perspective is it should never damage growth, right? It may prohibit growth in the sense that you may have to pull back on your messaging. So when you over message, think of email. What happens when you over message? You damage the brand, right? And people unsubscribe. So think of it when you put the same use that as a metaphor and you put it in the product. If you over message, you damage the brand, you get people that unsubscribe. So there is a balance there. Once again, data is the ruler on that point. When it gets to the point where growth is affected, and your brand reputation is affected by it, then you need to take a look at how aggressive it is. Now remember, we also talked about how people are rewarded. So the people that are doing the messaging within the application are probably rewarded on a quarterly basis because they're in sales, right? So they're thinking short term, how do I hit revenue goals? You're thinking long term, and you need to come to a decision. So first of all, there's going to be messaging in everyone. So in your situation, I think you're in agreement that there's going to be marketing and messaging in the product, right? That's going to happen. Where you want it is you want it one place and they want it somewhere else. So you come from a perspective that you're seeing that it's a user experience problem because most likely support is telling you that, or you've done surveys and you see that retention is creating that. The marketing side says, but we're generating revenue. Well, revenue is one thing, profit's another. Revenue minus churn gives you your profit. So at that point, you need to evaluate, yes, you're putting money in one pocket, but it's coming out of the other pocket because of user experience. So you need to get an agreement on, and by agreement, I mean at the top level, what is the company strategy? Is it revenue? Is it growth? Is it both? What risk and downside are they willing to live with? So at the executive level, so this is great at McAfee. I'll give you an example there and then come back to this. We had card on file. Basically means credit cards were stored. Someone, and I don't even know what his real name is because they only referred to him as the guy that broke the pool table. That was his name. I didn't even know what his real name is. He'd left the company. So every time they talked about the guy that broke the pool table, they really meant it was the guy that dumped millions of cards out of the database. Now, it wasn't a security issue. He deleted them. So we had to go back and do that. And we were worried about the perception the way we in the market. Well, our CEO said, we'll live with that. That was the end of the conversation. So going back to that, to your point, is what is the executive team willing to live with the cost of doing aggressive marketing, right? If they're willing to do it over the long term, then it's fine in the sense that's what part of the strategy is. I don't have an answer for you because it's not a formula. It's an interaction and an understanding of competing goals, right? So I will go back to one other point. When we released at McAfee, the first two releases, we were still successful in spite of ourselves. Like the user experience was absolutely horrible, right? But we still kept users. There were people that were willing to even go through this horrendous experience. And I'm sure you have a user base like that. So what support hears on a daily basis are all the top call drivers. You need to put that in perspective. They're going to hear problems all the time. That's what their job is, right? It doesn't mean out of a population of 1 million that 1% is a large group, right? There's still 99% that haven't said anything about the user experience. Now, clearly some of them are annoyed with it, but then there may be a majority that are there. So data, understanding the goals of the company and how they compete against one another, and revenue, it's a balancing thing. But over time, I would say, if you build the ability to market within a product, you can also build in the ability to A/B test and get closer and closer to that balance of user experience and messaging related to conversion. So it's not really it shouldn't be a conflict of philosophies on user experience versus revenue or very aggressive marketing. It should be a philosophy of how do we get closer and closer to the middle ground where everyone is a winner in it. Data and discussing with the consumers and understanding the goals of the organization all need to be balanced in that. So like I said, I can't give you a direct answer on that, but that's the approach I would take to it. First, understand how they're rewarded. They need to understand how you're rewarded. Ask the executive team, what are your short-term and your long-term goals? And if they're still in conflict, let them know that these things are in competition of one another. Then defer to their decision.
Hey, Brent. Thank you for coming and thank you for your speech, sharing your experience. My question will be very short. The question is, can the goal of the business be measured in money? Thank you.
Well, I can do that very, very easily by just looking at where we're here right now. this company here, and I've only known them for maybe a week, they don't measure their success only on revenue. The fact that they're involved in putting these types of things on, the fact that they have the product management school, right? The fact that they hire people that wouldn't normally be working in the tech space because they see this as a community, right? So they have another value here. That is, they'll do well as a business by making money, but then they know they're a member of a community, right? And they're building a community, a philosophy, the way things. So to that point, I don't agree with that the only measure for a successful business is revenue and money. The way they give back into the community is a big thing as well. And you see that now where a lot of organizations, particularly because millennials are the new people being hired in, they bring in a different philosophy as well, is they need meaningfulness in their jobs. And I'm sorry if it looks like there's quite a few millennials here, so Grandpa's going to talk about you and for you right now, okay? They bring in that perspective that what they do has to have a bigger meaning, right? And if you have an organization that is not simply just chasing revenue, but looking at how it contributes back into the community, and that does that, I think that's a win-win. So if I look at this business, this is a prime example, one, that revenue is not the only driver. It's their participation in the community and building up the Ukraine and Kiev as a tech hotspot is a pure example of the counter of just being measured by revenue and revenue alone.
Thanks. Just related somehow to previous questions, did you ever had a feeling or maybe some hypothesis that all these instruments like A/B testings, measuring conversions, and they are like very artificial and they are killing something like the soul of the product, something like this?
No, I don't. I think they'll kill the soul of the product if the data that comes out of them is not used for optimization. So I pointed out Pankaj before. I worked at McAfee and I was in charge of product management. Pankaj was in charge for portions of product marketing and marketing. So he was in charge of the sales. So he and I knew that we needed to make money, and we were constantly not at odds with one another. We knew that aggressive fear-type messages worked in converting sales. And it was at what point are you fear-mongering versus actually, hey, you're at risk, right? So and then there was another salesperson who wanted to basically say, hey, you know, your software's expired and it's now radioactive, right? So we were the buffer between that, and it's a balance of using data to get to that point where what messagings are resonating and not at the expense of the brand and the product. So, I mean, I used to I'm not a fan of the sales organization in general, even though we're all in sales, because it's a different sort of philosophy about the way they go about their job. However, it's necessary. And I used to say this would be a great business if we never had to sell anything, right? But that's not real. So it's going to be an ongoing basis. And I think what you need to make sure is there is a balance, and the winner needs to be the consumer or the end user, right? Often what happens is that they seem to fall out of the equation. It's like mom and dad yelling at one another, and the child sitting in the corner watching it, right? And they have an opinion of it, but they never get asked about it. So you need to validate it against the consumer base as well. I do caution, I mentioned slightly about the support. Remember, support may now and again get, hey, I'm just called up because I think you guys are great. That does happen. But it's nowhere near, hey, you guys suck, right? So they are inundated with those types of things all the time. And that basically, if that's all they're hearing, that's all they know about what the product's like, right? They provide it off to you. And maybe the problem might be smaller than it seems to be, simply because they're inundated with that. Data evaluation, verification against the market is the biggest thing. And I think I was asked to stop this, but I'll be around here if you want to ask directly. So we've got the 2 books, and I have no idea what the best questions were. I definitely know it wasn't, can 9 women make a baby in 9 months? let's take a vote on the questions. And then, of course, I completely lost what the questions were. Hey, who would like a copy of the Lean Startup? Okay, come and get it. Who would like another copy of the Lean Startup? Okay, come and get it. So the best questions for today were no. What was the best question for the day? Who would like a free book called The Lean Startup? That was the best question. So let me stop, and I think we have some meal, and I'll be walking around. You can come and ask me some questions. Feel free to do that. I told the group yesterday this has been one of the greatest career experiences I've ever had to come to the Ukraine. People talk about Canadians being polite and friendly, and the Ukraine people, that at least the subgroup that I've met, have like just blow us out of the water. It's just been a wonderful experience for me to come here. I think you guys are in a unique situation where there's interest in the software owners and business community to build something that's out there. So I ask that you take the time to actually look, find out what your core competency is, and build on it. Remember, you're a product. You're the product owner of yourself as well. So I wish you the best in your careers, and I thank you so much for this opportunity to come and speak with you. Thank you.